Hey, welcome back to Political Science 101, American Government and Politics at Simmons College. Um, I want to thank those of you who have commented on the last video. Don't forget to comment on this one that you watched it, that you've seen the video. That's how you get your participation grade for this class. That is how you get your participation grade. It's also how we count attendance this semester during these unusual times of the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope you're all staying safe. I hope your families are doing well. I hope that you're safe from COVID and everything else going on in the world today. I want to thank you all who not only commented you watched the video from Monday night, but also had some comments. And I know one of you said that you had not reviewed the branches of federal government since elementary school. And not only do I agree with you that that's the case for most people, but that's one of the problems with how we educate young people in this country. I think for me, I had it last time I had it was freshman year of college, and my freshman year of high school, in my freshman high school civics class. And we did it in one day. Executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch, and that was it. That was all we got. and it's so important, y'all. Like I keep saying, those people that make up those branches, they make decisions that impact all of us, whether we're part of those decisions or not. So it's incumbent upon us to try to be part of that, even though that's difficult at times. Even though it's easy to feel disenfranchised and left out of the loop when it comes to government decision making. In the United States, the government is theoretically run by the people. Is that the way that it always works in reality? No. But that's the way it's supposed to work according to our laws. That's the way it's supposed to work. I mentioned on the first class lecture video that this country has the potential to be great, but this country has a very troubling history of not only a lack of greatness, but a lack of greatness from a lack of effort towards equality, towards equal representation. I said just a minute ago that it's easy to feel disenfranchised from government decision making in the United States. And I'm saying that as a middle-class white man. Throughout our history, from the founding of this nation up to the present day, the people who are disenfranchised to the greatest extent are, of course, not middle-class property-owning white men, but everyone else. It is so easy to feel like your voices don't count in our government decision-making processes. But the first step towards getting involved in that process, and at the very least, understanding and knowing why those processes, those decisions are being made, is understanding the system itself. And that brings me back to those three branches of federal government, the national government. Let's talk about the executive branch a little bit. What does the executive branch do? Get the president. The president is the head of the executive branch. That's the head of the executive branch. And the head of the executive branch has many powers and lots of authority. It's derived from the Constitution. The Constitution says the president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Now, when the Constitution was written back in the 1700s, that meant a lot. It was important who was the commander-in-chief. But today it's taken on a whole different, really the last 60 years in particular has taken on a totally different meaning, because the President of the United States has the power to command the strongest largest, best equipped, and most expensive military in the world. The president also has the ability to command thousands of nuclear weapons. One weapon could destroy a city the size of Louisville and kill everybody in it. That's something that the folks who wrote the Constitution did not contemplate. So the president has that very, very large responsibility of being commander-in-chief of the United States military. What else does the president do? I mentioned in the last video that Congress passes legislation. They pass bills that become statutes once they're signed into law by the president. The president has to give his consent to acts of Congress, or the president can veto acts of Congress. And Congress has the ability to override that veto. A veto is when the president says, "Nah, I don't want this to be a law." Congress can say, "Okay, I guess it's not going to be a law," or 2/3 of Congress can actually override that veto, can override the president's objection to a statute. The president can also issue executive orders. What's an executive order? Well, the executive branch of government is made up of many, many, many agencies, government agencies. Some of them you've heard of, some of you might not have heard of. The Department of Justice prosecutes and investigates federal crimes and civil actions taken by legal actions taken by the federal government. Housing and Urban Development, people call it HUD, H-U-D. That's a very important one that doesn't get in the news very often, but it's one that I care a great deal about because it's an agency in the federal government that has to do with subsidized housing and with regulating the housing market in the United States. One that I work with at my quote-unquote day job every single day is Health and Human Services. Now, you may or may not have heard of HHS, Health and Human Services, which is a federal department, a federal agency. But if you're like most people, you've at least heard of and maybe know a bit about Medicare. Medicare is health care for the elderly and people with disabilities. And Medicaid. Medicaid is healthcare funding for people who are lower income. Those are just two things that a great big federal agency called Health and Human Services is responsible for. The president can issue executive orders that have to do with directing any federal agency. And as long as it doesn't violate the Constitution or violate some act of Congress, those executive orders are the law. Now, the next couple minutes of this video, I'm going to say this. I'm going to knock out something very important here, and then be done with lectures for the week. But this part is really important. There are different types of laws in the United States. There are actually many different types. You may have learned in grade school how a bill becomes a law. You may have watched the Schoolhouse Rock video. If you haven't, I highly recommend getting on YouTube and looking up Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law. A bill is something written by members of Congress that once it passes Congress and is signed into law by the president, becomes a statute. A statute is one kind of law. Again, there are many different types of laws. Here are the big ones. First and foremost, at the top of this pyramid is the Constitution. The United States Constitution is the ultimate law in this country. All other laws, be they federal, be they state or local laws, must conform to and be within the guidelines set by the United States Constitution. If you don't take anything else away from this class, understand that there's a Constitution, and the things that are contained within the Constitution are the most powerful laws in the United States. Well, if that's all you get from the class, you should also know about a couple of pieces of the Constitution we're going to talk about later in the semester. Pieces that theoretically guarantee equality for all Americans. Theoretically. Talk about that later. But the Constitution is the ultimate law of the land. After the Constitution comes statutes. A statute is a piece of legislation, a bill that has been passed by Congress. We'll talk more about Congress next week, but Congress is the House of Representatives and the Senate. When both of those chambers, the House and the Senate, pass a bill, they vote by majority vote, and then it's signed into law by the president. It's a statute. Or they override the president's veto. Then it becomes a statute. A statute is mightier than every other law except the Constitution. After statutes, you've got those executive orders that I was talking about before. An executive order. That's something issued by the president that is a law, as long as it does not violate a statute or the Constitution. Executive orders often come about because the statute says they must come about. In other words, Congress says, okay, we're going to pass this statute, but then the executive branch has to do something with it, has to actually enforce it. The executive branch enforces the laws. And that's what executive orders are mostly about, or what they're supposed to be about. Some presidents, notably recently former President Donald Trump, loved to try to issue executive orders that went above and beyond anything set by statute or the Constitution. That's not legal. That is not a valid law. One more thing you got to know about. Remember, Constitution, statutes, executive orders. On an even keel with the executive orders are something that's kind of similar called an administrative regulation. Now, we're not going to talk too much about these in this class, but they're important. They're really important because that's not an order by the president, but it is a rule, a law, really, created by one of those agencies like Housing and Urban Development or Health and Human Services or the Department of Justice. That, again, it's not written by the president, but it has the authority of that agency, that piece of the executive branch. Just like executive orders, administrative regulations shall not do anything to violate statutes or the Constitution. So what does the executive branch do? They enforce the law. They enforce the Constitution. They enforce and utilize statutes. Maybe Congress passes a statute saying there shall be Medicaid for people who make under a certain income level. It's like government-funded insurance for those people. Well, then some government agency has to make all sorts of detailed rules and regulations that explain how that's going to happen and put that statute into practice. That's what the executive branch does. With that, I'm going to wind it down and sign off for not only for tonight, but also for the week. I will say I've seen emails and comments from some of you all that I need to respond to directly, and I will. I don't know if Miss Barger still has copies of the textbook, but I know a couple of you all have reached out to her and have scheduled a time to pick up your book from her, and that's good. I'm glad you're doing that. I'm glad you can get a free copy of the textbook. But until next week, please keep reading the book if you have it. If you don't have it, it's okay. It's okay. That's why that's one of the reasons why I assign readings, as you see in the syllabus supplement. I assign readings in big chunks, so you have several weeks to get sections of the book read. And as you begin to read the book, don't forget that the textbook is not flawless. It's not perfect. Neither are my lectures. Neither are these videos. If you question something, if you're skeptical of something, if you want more evidence or more discussion of something from the textbook or these videos, let me know. Either post it in the comments below or reach out to me, email or text. All right, y'all, so thank you so much for watching this video. That's my lecture on the executive branch, and we're going to talk about the legislative branch and judicial branches next week. Important stuff, because the people who run those branches, they make decisions that impact all of us. And if you don't believe me yet, by the end of the semester, I think you will, because federal government is powerful. We'll talk more about that later. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but we'll talk more about that later on. Y'all have a good rest of the week. Please stay safe. Please take care of your families and stay safe from this pandemic. And I will talk to y'all again soon.